So about a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember because time is just flying at the minute, I did a piece on Formula One's commercial rights holders wanting to go back to the fabled V8 engines in 2030, with all the hybrid stuff binned off and the engines being loud and all that good stuff. I've also done one before that, which involved me using a glorified video game to show you how the aero stuff for 2026 might not be all that, and how the FIA might have messed up bigly in the process. But now the FIA has come out and gone, right, we've basically got the blueprint of what is to come, even though they haven't officially signed off on it all yet, and that is expected to happen at the end of this month. But at least on paper, some of the 2026 regulations address some of the concerns that fans have about the cars being too big and too long and too heavy and, well, all the other bits and pieces I like to complain about, really. And apologies if you don't actually see pictures of the proposed cars in this video. I've dug through the FIA's content usage policies and it says stuff about not using their stuff for commercial use, which I guess this is because, well, I make money off these videos with ads, Patreon and other stuff. But I think I have a way around it because, well, I might have actually driven these new cars, albeit virtually, so pictures are really just going to be placeholders using the current generation of cars and cars from the past for comparison for the most part, and Alamy hasn't got the renders yet. I know, it sucks, but I have to keep things legal after last time. Long story. You might be thinking, why are you telling us this? We're just here for your opinion rather than pretty pictures. It's because there's always one. If I get in before they do, they can't complain. Like and subscribe for more 1000 IQ moments. And when I say I've driven them already, albeit virtually, what I mean is the 2026 Formula 1 cars look eerily similar to a car that was released in rFactor 2 a few years ago. The rear wing assembly looks similar. The nose cone on the real car is a bit fatter, but I expect the teams to run something that might be a bit more aerodynamically efficient. The front wing is less anhedral than it is on the Formula Pro, and the floor is a bit smaller on the real car too. Then there's the simpler front wing assembly and the rear wing marginally different too. The only difference is that the Formula Pro is powered by a 3-litre V10 and not a hybrid, but they're not that far removed at all. Even the paint job the FIA gave looks like the old Zancho colours. Memories. I might as well just use this for all the demo shots, but I'll find a way of figuring all this out. I have done in-depth bits on the actual engines before, but this is more to do with the changes to the actual cars and the rulebook to help facilitate overtaking and that kind of thing. So the engines, that's somewhere else on the channel today, just the cars. It's been widely documented that the cars in Formula 1 now are too bulky, too heavy, too wide and produce too much dirty air. The FIA has used the phrase to ensure closer racing a lot in their press releases, and it's starting to become a phrase that there's going to be a lot of eye rolling over, because how many times have we heard that phrase now over the last 5 or 6 years? They did several changes during the 2017 to 2021 regulations to try and reduce outwash, reduce this and this and this and this, but it didn't work. Tyres were still being shredded in dirty air and nobody could get close. So what happened then is the cars will be reduced in terms of the wheelbase from 3.6 metres to 3.4 metres, and the width will be reduced from 2 metres to 1.9 metres. Doesn't sound like a lot, I know, with the overall floor being reduced by 150mm. In turn, the weight of the cars will be reduced by around 30 kilograms and downforce and drag will be reduced by about 30%. That might get some alarm bells ringing. What? 30% less downforce? The cars are going to be slow? No, they're just going to be slower than what they have been. They will still destroy an IndyCar around a track and utterly obliterate anything else below that. I think a lot of people will take being able to follow closely and actually be able to do some racing over more lap times. Most of the downforce loss has come in making the ground effect less powerful and also reducing the power of the diffusers. On top of this, the front wing will be 100mm narrower and will have a flap on it that will function a bit like DRS, which we will get to in a minute. But what is interesting to note here is that there will be less reliance on ground effect and diffuser performance, and that will mean that cars won't have to run as stiffly as they used to, which is a huge plus. The cars are sprung so stiffly to keep the ride heights and ground effect working optimally that cars are basically taking one line through corners and can't attack the curbing like they used to. See what happened when Alonso was forced wide by Ocon in 2022 at Brazil. He lost control on the curb and almost stacked it. Now, cars should be able to attack curbs better and the drivers shouldn't be getting their spines reduced to dust on bumpy tracks. What they're also hoping is that the cars will be able to run a bit more rake at the rear, which should help generate some extra turn in and make the cars a bit more nimble in the corners. I know, it's just a video game, but there is a distinct difference in feel between a 2020 Formula 1 car and a 2023 one, like when I tried to throw a few around Silverstone in a what if it still had bridge corner video. Even though the 2020 cars were big and chunky, they could still turn. I suppose that's all the aero they had on tap at the time versus what they've got today. But the 2023 cars don't want to go in as hard into the corners, and they just feel really sluggish. They felt worse to drive than a car from the late 90s or early 2000s, which had way less downforce available to them. They're just too big. But where the confusion begins for me is what the FIA is attempting to do to promote closer racing. On the FIA's official press release, which has been a big reference for this video, and I'll leave a link so you can go through it at your leisure, is the introduction of this active aerodynamics stuff, which I don't know if it's because I'm getting old, but what they're describing sounds like it's come straight out of F-Zero or Wipeout or something along those lines. Currently, Formula 1 cars have DRS, the drag reduction system, and it's simple enough to follow as to how it works. If you are within 1 second of a car at a certain trigger point on the track, you'll be able to use this tool down the next straight. The problem is, DRS in recent years means a slam dunk overtake at pretty much every track except for Monaco and Hungary. But without it, you're not going to see any action, as we saw when it broke at Abu Dhabi about 4 or 5 years ago, was it? So it's a necessary evil to keep people watching. But they overdid it. So it looks like for 2026 DRS will be out. Don't get too excited because it's being replaced with something called X-Aero and Z-Aero. Like I said, sounds like something out of F-Zero or Star Wars. Lock the S-foils in attack position and so on. What these two things mean is that on straights, drag will be reduced, and in the corners, drag will be turned up. That's pretty much it. In Z mode, as a car starts to enter a corner sequence like Maggots and Beckett's at Silverstone for instance, the driver can press a button and the car will magically move the front and rear wings about to produce more grip through those corners. On faster sections, drivers can enter X mode and that will function much like DRS, but only in zones where the FIA thinks that using it will be safe. So it's kind of like DRS Plus. Imagine trying to throw a car through cops with the DRS open. You're going into a wall. But because the front and rear wing will be modified, it's not going to be as violent on the turn-in. The FIA reckons it will be allowed whenever a car is in a straight line for more than 3 seconds. And it will also be available when a car is within a second of the car in front. In certain corners like Curva Grande, I can imagine that it will also be available to help cars on the run up to a chicane or whatever. I think through turn 1 at Silverstone it might not be allowed because of how tight it is in comparison. It will sort of work similar to how the 2012 DRS rules were in qualifying. You could basically open it wherever you wanted so long as it was safe, like they didn't allow it in the tunnel for instance. But like I said, it's all very video game-like. The one thing the FIA hasn't said as of yet is how it will actually work. By that I mean is, well, let's say you have 10 degrees on the front and 8 degrees on the rear, of wing flap that is. How much does it get upped by in Z mode to help with cornering, and how much is taken off in X mode when you're in a straight line? And on top of this, what are the rules of engagement? Let's say the car in the lead has been overtaken. When does the guy that's just been overtaken get to attack back? When can he activate X mode or Z mode? I have questions. Also helping the cars will be the removal of the MGU-H. Okay, I said I was going to be mainly talking about the cars rather than the engines, but this leads me into something else. What this then does is it means there will be an increase in available battery power, which some people on the internet have taken, that as, we are making F1 electric. Somehow, I don't understand the mental gymnastics that allowed them to arrive at that conclusion either. But thanks to the different construction of the engines and the cars, the brakes are going to be doing a lot more recharging of the batteries through the kinetic energy recovery systems, which is basically standard for any hybrid car. It's just turned up to 11. The interesting part here is that drivers now have access to a manual override button to bring things back to the construction of the cars and the rules that they're going to bring in for 2026. When they press this button, they will get a boost of electrical power, much like they would have done with KERS in 2013 or just manual deploy on the ERS now. But what happens is, so long as they're within a second of the guy in front, they will get the boost. But as the car gets faster and faster and faster, the amount of boost will drop off. And I have actually found this bit quite interesting. So like I say, you're within a second of the car in front and you press the boost button. What you'll get is the maximum legal amount the battery can give you, which apparently is 470 horsepower. Although that 470 horsepower won't be used all the time, because the drivers need to manage the use of the hybrid across the per lap allocation and the actual amount of charge they've got in the battery already. I'll explain that in a minute. The FIA hasn't released the scaling yet, but apparently it's going to be the full lot available from about 180 miles an hour, so what's that, 300k down to zero deployment at 220 miles an hour, or 355 kilometers an hour. Basically, it's a glorified push-to-pass system that IndyCar has and what DTM used to have. Where the concerns start to creep in is, will this just mean more slam dunk overtakes when they use it in conjunction with this X mode, or whatever it's called? Okay, they aren't using it until 180 miles an hour, which is pretty quick even by Formula 1 standards, but where are things going to start crossing over? And also remember that the cars are going to be less draggy in 2026, which means that any boost they're going to get is just going to amplify things a little more. So to explain the whole thing about the boost, I'll use this screenshot from the RSS Formula Hybrid car in Assetto Corsa. On the display on the wheel, you will see two bars, a blue one and a yellow one. Yellow is the overall state of charge for the battery, and blue is your allocation for the lap. So as long as there is yellow on that bar, you'll be able to use your lap allocation. If you use all the blue, the yellow won't go down. I hope that makes sense. And different deployment profiles are available so that you'll get varying amounts of deploy dependent on your speed and what you are doing. So for top speed mode, you'll get your hybrid deploy mostly at around 320 kilometers an hour to keep the speed up. And for others, it'll be focused more on the acceleration phase or be more balanced depending on what you select. It's a handful, but once you get your head around it and you know how much you're going to be using around a certain track, it's actually not too bad. The one thing that did catch my eye about all of this stuff for 2026 is that when these new regulations kick in, Formula 1 will not be burning any fossil fuels whatsoever. All the fuel is going to be synthetic. It's going to be made out of discarded foodstuffs. It's going to be made out of like municipal waste, I think was one of the things they got on there, or even extracted directly from the environment, so that when it's burned, it's not pumping loads of crap into the atmosphere and making asthmatics like me, well, miserable. And because of all the research and development that's going into it, hopefully within the next 5-10 years, a lot of that will be passed back on to us. Because, let's face it, petrol is getting expensive. I filled up at the local supermarket on Tuesday at £1.42 per litre. That's $6.87 a gallon. Not as high as it was at the start of 2022 when it was about £1.80 a litre or $8.71 a gallon, but still expensive. Accelerating the research into synthetic fuels that are cleaner and contain less of the crap that gets thrown out into the atmosphere is a good thing, especially for those of us that live in urban areas, and congested urban areas like those seen in Britain and Japan and other places like that. And if the costs come down in turn of these fuels, even better. And the cleaner petrol we have, then people won't be less pressured into getting rid of their current cars and into hybrids and EVs. A term that the FIA has applied to this fuel is drop-in. What they mean by that is you can take the fuel out of Verstappen's Red Bull, out of Hamilton's Ferrari, out of Sainz's wherever he's going, and drop it straight into a 2006 Vauxhall Corsa. Well, once I've jump-started it because it needs a new battery, but you can put it into something as old as that. So on the face of it, there are things that do look good. Smaller wheelbases, slightly smaller tyres, which is something I didn't really get into, and the cars are just overall going to be smaller, as well as the bit about the fuel. That's actually interesting. But there are some things that will be okay, I'll believe it when I see it, or at least get more of a technical explanation on. The X and Z aero things, they feel too video gamey. The drivers have got enough to do already, and it's probably going to take too much away from the driving. How much of this is going to be automated? Will the boost button plus the new take on DRS make things more of a slam dunk overtake than it already is? And other questions like that. But I don't know. I'd like to hear your thoughts on things. Well, read them. But with 6 engine manufacturers on the grid for 2026, at least something looks healthy. The big question is, how much is the order going to get shaken up in 2026? Who knows? So then, a look at the new regulations for 2026 that the FIA recently released. If this has got your brain going, or you otherwise think I made some good points, then do like the video so I know a good job was done. And for more stuff like this, get subscribed with the bell on so you never miss out on anything else I do around here. Massive thanks to the fine bunch of lads over at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep things running around here, then a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials, affiliate links, and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Or there's super thanks down there if you want to buy me a coffee, or memberships if that's more your thing, and just be a bit more overt with your support. So until next time, I've been AdmiralLaWind, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.